As this channel has grown over the years, I've been faced with many hard-hitting questions from all of you guys. Hey Ghost, have you ever played this? Ghost, have you ever played that? Are you ever gonna do a video on this guy or that guy? What's your favorite video game? And who is your favorite video game character? So today, right now, I would like to, at the very least, definitively answer that final question with this.
Here we go.
Donkey Kong, probably the most famous primate of the modern world and one of the marquee characters of this entire industry. This beautiful, nearly naked gorilla is absolutely my favorite video game character of all time, and it ain't close. I mean, just look at it. The big bruising ape of Donkey Kong Island, a legendary gaming mascot that's been around for a whopping 43 years and counting, appearing in over 100 different video games, tossing barrels, collecting bananas, riding animals, hanging out with his cast of Kongs, and punching fools into other dimensions for nearly half a century. A carefree gorilla who likes to kick back and relax, but also a fearless hero who uses his strength, his agility, and general just monkey powers to always protect his family, his friends, his banana horde, and go on all sorts of goofy adventures. Because when it comes to that inner circle Nintendo cast, not only does DK here have a seat at the table, he is one of its founding fathers. A character whose very name is synonymous with video games. And hey, I know what the naysayers are thinking right now at this moment. Donkey Kong isn't a hero. That big fool got his start by stealing Italian women. Well listen, this is a complicated mammal and we are going to cover it all here today. From his initial creation, to the arcade days, to DK's massive makeover by a different developer entirely, to that unholy, abominable TV show, all the way up to this current moment being played by Seth Rogen in a Hollywood movie. There is a lot to get to, and hopefully by the end of today's video you too can clearly see why DK is simply the best. So what is it that makes Donkey Kong so iconic? What does his weird name even mean? How did he go from arch-rival of Mario to a frontline good guy? Is that tie a suggestion that he is indeed otherwise naked voluntarily? And what is the lasting legacy Donkey Kong has left on this industry? Well, as always, I just want to take a quick moment to thank all of my incredible patrons for supporting this channel away from YouTube. You guys are the best. I am Ghost, your host as always. Now please, grab your banana, hold that balloon tight, and let's get right into this DK rap. As with anything Nintendo, the story of this character really begins with industry legend Shigeru Miyamoto way back in the early 1980s. A time where Nintendo, still a sort of toy company, was attempting to find its footing and enter that rapidly growing video game landscape with a bang. Now, the 1970s had given them a start with their color TV game lineup, and the year 1980 saw them release the wildly successful Game & Watch handhelds, but back in the day, man, if you really wanted to make a name for yourself, you needed to have an arcade cabinet that kids and adults alike would line up their quarters for all around the world. Now, Nintendo had made a few with varying success, Sheriff and Radar Scope, but it wasn't until they put the rapidly ascending Miyamoto in direct charge of development of a game that the company would finally strike gold. Well, around this time, Nintendo was actually in the process of acquiring the license to use the characters and settings from the famous Popeye comics in their next title. So it was lining up for Miyamoto and his team to be tasked with making something of that opportunity. Miyamoto then designed a game that would have the players controlling the titular Popeye attempting to save the protagonist's girlfriend Olive Oil from the constantly brutish Bluto guy, who always kind of wanted to have her to himself. And if you know anything about it, this sort of triangle of characters was everything to the original Popeye. But honestly, it would end up being the winning formula for Nintendo in a completely unforeseen way. Because during development, that licensing deal completely fell through, so on the fly, Nintendo was forced to make up their very own original characters to take the Popeye cast's places. Characters that could be used in the branding not only for this game, but into the future as the company was attempting to kind of find its own identity. This is of course when Popeye was transformed into Jumpman, later Mario, Olive Oil was now Pauline, and well, big old Bluto was given a new lease on life as a huge, mean, girlfriend-stealing, barrel-tossing gorilla known simply as Donkey Kong. And it would be from this adversary that the game itself would also get its now world-famous title. So according to some old interviews, Miyamoto went through various options when it came to creating these three characters, but he did feel pretty concretely that an animal replacing the formerly human antagonist would just give the game a more like fun, approachable energy to it, you know, something more family-friendly. But he didn't want that animal to be too, quote, evil or repulsive, so he went with, citing Beauty and the Beast as well as King Kong as pretty obvious inspiration points. He then went on to describe Donkey Kong himself as a character that would never be perceived as too malicious, but more of a quote, funny and hang loose kind of guy, which, I mean, right here, as we see on the first ever public depiction of the character, he definitely comes across as like pretty chill. I mean, he's not mad about stealing Mario's girl, he's just kind of like, hey, come get me, man. And then there is that name, Donkey Kong. I mean, Kong, obviously, with King Kong as the backdrop, and also it's just kind of used as a generic term for monkeys in Japan, apparently. But as a kid, I always wondered where the donkey came from. I mean, that's a whole ass other animal entirely. So apparently, Miyamoto simply wanted to convey to English-speaking audiences specifically that this was not just an ape, it was kind of a stupid ape, you know, thick-skulled, determined, I guess like a donkey. And according to legend, when he pitched the name to Nintendo America, they all kind of laughed, and they told him, well, donkey isn't really used to call people stupid that often, but Miyamoto had already fallen in love with the name, so he just didn't care. Maybe it's because we all grew up with it, but doesn't Donkey Kong just have a certain ring to it too? I mean, it works so well. And that shorthand DK is super easy to say, remember, and you would never confuse it with anything else. So as you likely know, the structure of this Donkey Kong game was simple enough. You control Mario, and you have to ascend through these various levels full of hazards being tossed down the screen at you by the monkey. Pauline would just kind of helplessly be standing there awaiting rescue from her brave blue-collar boyfriend, and eventually, you succeed, you topple the ape down his steel beam castle and right onto his noggin. So this was it, the original, pure, unaltered vision for this character. A simple villain for a simple game that went on to launch the entire Nintendo gaming empire. So one would think Donkey Kong would have set a new standard for Nintendo. A unique name, a clear character, reliable branding to just plow forward into the future with. But unfortunately for DK, it would actually be the devoid of all personality protagonist Mario that ended up emerging as the centerpiece of the future. Now, in the following year of '82, Nintendo did release Donkey Kong Jr., a brand new game as a direct sequel, and even though I think this is way better and more interesting than the original, it just sadly did not enjoy the financial success that the company was kind of hoping for. And I personally can't help but think that the name of the game maybe hurt things. I mean, I would have assumed at the time it was like Donkey Kong, but for little kids. Fisher-Price Donkey Kong. It's a pretty interesting game though, and not only because it starred the absolutely forgotten DK Jr. character, but because this is the only full-release Nintendo title ever that saw Mario act as the main antagonist.
I got Donkey Kong, and now I'll get you too, Junior.
I'm Donkey Kong Jr., and that's my papa. I'm trying to save him, and boy, do I need your help.
He has caged up Donkey Kong since saving his girlfriend, and then you, obviously as DK's son, attempt to free Yo Daddy. Now, the game is good, and DK's role in it is kind of just standing there in jail, but I guess you can just see how early on here, there were no good guys, there were no bad guys. It was all about perspectives, okay? Very deep stuff. But you know what? Poor sales be damned, that still was not the end. In the following year, '82 into '83, Nintendo would release 3 games. Popeye, which they had finally gotten the rights for, Super Mario Bros., which would become a worldwide phenomenon on the brand new home console NES, and then the often passed over and rather strange arcade cabinet, Donkey Kong 3. Now this game is a bit different. DK of course returns in his kind of villain role, being angry as hell, climbing ropes and stuff, but this time around, he's putting the barrels aside and he's harnessing the power of bugs. Yes, bugs, son. He has broken into your greenhouse and he wants to mess up your plants for some reason. There is far less overall progression in this game. It's kind of just like a shoot 'em up high score thing where you do your best to dodge the bugs, save the plants, and then shoot the great ape right in his bohunkus with a sprayer. Oh, also, this isn't Mario, dummy. No, that's Stanley. You know Stanley from Greenhouse, the Game & Watch game. Everyone knows Stanley, right? That's Stanley. Donkey Kong 3 is just weird, and I think very representative of how Nintendo had really taken things to another level with Mario and Luigi, but man, DK was just in this sort of limbo. His name and likeness would always be enough to sell games, but without a clear role and very little mechanical consistency or characterization, he would sadly fall into disuse and a little bit of obscurity for just over a decade. Now, let's be clear, comparing anyone to Mario, especially in the 80s, is just unfair, and even though DK had to take a bit of a vacation, he certainly didn't disappear entirely. I mean, things like a cameo appearance in Tetris, he's a spectator in the background in Punch-Out!, he had a cereal with like commercials, a couple Game & Watches like Donkey Kong Hockey, and then the honestly incredible expanded version of the original Donkey Kong, which was on the Game Boy, with over 100 new levels and really pretty graphics. Very, very good game. I think one of the best DK has ever seen. But still, by today's standards, and I hope you're with me on this, that's not my Kong, man. It feels like a prototype still, you know? An idea. And I think for a character so integral to Nintendo's success, so famous worldwide, DK just deserved so much more. Well, in 1993, 10 years after his last real starring appearance, Donkey Kong would not only return center stage, fellas, he would receive possibly the most insane glow-up in the history of the video game industry when a small UK-based game studio called Rare started work on a little Super Nintendo game known as Donkey Kong Country. Now this right here is the turning point completely for Donkey Kong as a character. This brand new series transformed him inside and out into a legitimate video game protagonist, a leading ape, a hero. It gifted him all the physical characteristics and personality traits that he is known for to this day, and showed the world that he was more than worthy of sitting right next to his old nemesis Mario. But how? I mean, how did this happen seemingly overnight? How did this little British developer that had worked on like Wheel of Fortune video games just a few years earlier even get their hands on a character like this, and how did it all go so well? Well, yes, Rare had made a bunch of kind of random titles for the NES and Game Boy previously, but some of those had been published by Nintendo themselves. They were familiar with Rare. And in the early 1990s, Nintendo decided to kind of make the rounds, visiting in-person studios that they had admired and felt were talented, specifically when it came to animations. Because you need to remember something, this is the 90s, dude. The times where the console wars were absolutely raging. I mean, companies taking like direct shots at each other in ads on a week-to-week basis. And it just so happens that the current talk of the town was the Sega Genesis title Aladdin. Its fluid artwork and amazing animation quality was actually worked on personally by Disney artists, which is just not fair. But that made the game a real console seller, so Nintendo wanted to kind of respond with something groundbreaking themselves that following year. Well, at the time, Rare had been experimenting with a ton of really cool 3D rendering techniques and pre-rendered backgrounds. So to prepare for this visit, they threw together a tech demo starring a boxing character fighting against this woman with a staff. Now, Rare at the time was also starting work on the now famous Killer Instinct fighting game, and we're just using some of the models from that. It was very, very simple stuff, but all they wanted to show Nintendo is how this 3D style could look on screen when it was in actual motion. And listen, while it might look kind of campy right now, back then, this was beyond unique and cool. I mean, it was realistic, it was atmospheric, it seemed to pop right off your TV, and let's just say, Nintendo was sold instantly. They wasted no time in tasking Rare with making something visually stunning for the SNES, and decided that of all the characters and properties they had on hand, Donkey Kong honestly made the most sense to offer them. The character had been cast aside for some time, and the backstory and world of DK was completely unexplored. This would give Rare that kind of full runway of creative freedom to just go out and make an awesome Donkey Kong game with zero strings attached. Now, of course, initially Donkey Kong was drawn and designed by Miyamoto, but Rare's redesign? Oh my god. Character artist Kevin Bayliss, who had created the characters for other games like Battletoads and then all of Killer Instinct, really took the lead on this task, and I would say it is perfect. Visually, this new Donkey Kong was much more of a bruiser. You know, that low brow, the big muscles, the attitude, the Jimmy Neutron hair swoop. There's kind of an overall intimidation factor here that lets you know this guy means business, but he's also kind of cool. And also, at last, the tie. I have always heard, and I don't know how true this is, that in Japan there's kind of a tradition of red ties being worn by heroes, as well as by leaders like the president of a country or a prime minister. And these are definitely all ideas that were being openly explored and expanded here for the first time with the character. Because as far as narrative and characterization, Donkey Kong here is the resident and leader of Donkey Kong Island, alongside the brand new original characters Diddy, Funky, Candy, and Cranky Kong. But oh, guess what? Old Cranky Kong here, who's kind of like a paternal figure for our hero, that is canonically the original Donkey Kong from the arcade games, which, I mean, makes sense, he was very cranky. And I just think this is a really fun way for the Rare devs to have kind of like officially turned the page on that original character, but still comment directly on that makeover as well. Well, in Donkey Kong Country, the evil King K. Rool and his kind of croc pirates have stolen the Kong's massive banana cache, and that's pretty bad. So it's up to you to kick some beavers' asses, ride some animals, listen to the greatest soundtrack ever made, and retrieve what is rightfully yours. Simple as that. But man, that 3D rendered 2D platforming style just proved to be the secret ingredient for an extremely impressive and ultimately beloved game to this day. Tight controls, replayability, high difficulty, it all made it just approachable for people of all ages. And needless to say, it was absolutely the system seller Nintendo was hoping for and the game that dragged DK right back into the spotlight, as he was poised to be one of the crown jewels of Nintendo moving right into the mid-1990s. The following years saw the release of direct sequels to Donkey Kong Country in Diddy's Kong Quest and Dixie Kong's Double Trouble, both of them mesmerizingly good games that were just expanding further on this new kind of Kong realm that Rare was constructing. More characters, more slick environments, and of course, more incredible music. And this we have to touch on because music ended up being a huge part of what makes a Donkey Kong game a Donkey Kong game. David Wise is just an absolute wizard, and really, he set a new standard for what was even possible with the limited hardware on the SNES, while also just crafting some of the most incredible tunes that the industry has ever seen to this day. It's a pattern that just continues to repeat. I mean, if you see Donkey Kong, you know the music is going to be solid gold. Just go look at how many compilations of amazing jams are on YouTube. But in this continuation of the Country series, Donkey Kong himself actually took a bit of a back seat and really let the kids do the work, which made Diddy and Dixie incredible standout characters of the 90s in their own right. And Kiddy Kong, I guess we can include you too. But as the N64 arrived in the late 90s, polygonal 3D graphics began to completely take over, and Nintendo started turning their attention toward multiplayer party games. You know the ones. Mario Kart 64, Mario Party 1, 2, and 3, and the original Super Smash Bros. All released around this time frame with those all-star lineups that we've all kind of come to expect from Nintendo. And of course, from the very beginning, right alongside Mario and Luigi was this new and improved DK. His now iconic red tie swinging in the breeze, always featuring as a large, heavy type fighting character relying on brute strength to just kind of overpower his opponents. DK stocks were simply soaring as the world approached a new millennium, and that growing popularity of DK as a character, well, it was not lost on Nintendo. So, unfortunately, for every living being on Earth at the time, they, along with Rare, pursued something unholy, something unnatural that violated the sacred tenets, a television program based on Donkey Kong Country.
Hey, yo, look out down below. Here comes Banana Slammer. No!
Yes, believe it or not, this not only existed, but it was a musical. Oh my god. The Crystal Coconut, Candy Kong's redesign, Bluster Kong, Kong Fu, Inka Dinka Doo. This show is absolutely insane. It's kind of like those waking nightmares one has when you're a kid and you're really sick during the summer and you can't tell if you've died or not. However, some of the songs slap. I mean, I cannot tell a lie.
I don't know what's happening to me. I'm getting all the blame for things I didn't do. Can anybody tell me just what I did wrong? I'm all alone and I'm so confused.
Donkey Kong as a character was voiced and performed by Richard Yearwood, and it is just so strange to hear my man talk like this.
More like he's relaxing and hating every minute of it.
I mean, what the hell? Now, previously to this show, in the olden days, DK was always just kind of grunting, speaking in broken ape words here and there. But DK's voice overall is just this wildly inconsistent thing over the course of his entire history that another really great YouTuber, Thomas Game Docs, made a wonderful video on. So please check out the link down below. Really interesting stuff. But man, this show, you just had to be there. Also, it was initially introduced to the world in a French exclusive cable network program called which kind of blended live action with these 3D rendered Kong characters. My god, look at this. What a time to be alive. Well, sadly, or I guess gladly, the show would not last very long, running just a pair of psychedelic seasons before getting canned in the year 2000. Donkey Kong 64 is another game of this kind of early 3D era that just really helped cement this version of the character in the Nintendo canon. Also developed by Rare, who had made the Banjo-Kazooie games, this to this day is a personal favorite of mine. An atmospheric, unforgettable collectathon adventure with, I admit, a few unforgivably annoying mechanics thrown in here and there. Now I know some people hate this game, they say it killed the entire genre of collectathons. Well, guess what? You're wrong. This game goes crazy, and I love it. There's more new Kongs here than ever before, the level design is great, and how could you forget the beloved and historically significant DK rap?
Here we go.
Now this right here is honestly a perfect representation of what Donkey Kong was starting to become. He was the cool Nintendo character, the one that as a kid, you felt like you could go and grab a cold little hug fruit barrel with and shoot the breeze. A laid-back hero that showed a ton of personality in his games, which was pretty different from the other Nintendo characters of the time. I mean, Mario Bros, Samus, Link, I'm sorry y'all, I'm gonna be riding with the Kong. In the years after his reimagining, Donkey Kong just kinda continued to thrive, and as the generations rolled over into the 2000s, he just kept winning. Now, Donkey Konga is a notable rhythm game for the GameCube that I have to mention because A, look at the controller, absolutely elite and also used for a few other DK-themed games, and then B, I did my middle school science fair project on sleep deprivation and video game performance, and I used Donkey Konga as the subject of my experiment. Here we go. Oh my god, wow. Thank you, Mom, for sending me these pictures, by the way. Incredible craftsmanship. And right there, that's my best friend Cameron at probably 5 in the morning tweaking off some Sour Patch Kids. Very good stuff, man. Great times. Now, it's not a big deal, but I did end up getting second place at the school for this bad boy. And if you were wondering, yes, we got progressively more shit at the game the longer we stayed up. Surprise. But putting those bongos aside, the early 2000s also saw Nintendo revive the kind of classic Mario vs. Donkey Kong theme with a brand new series called, well, Mario vs. Donkey Kong. It all started on the Game Boy Advance, got a few titles, and then recently a modern remaster on Switch, which I think is very, very cool. This was also a time of kind of like one-off Donkey Kong themed games like Jungle Climber, King of Swing, and a few others, but in my opinion, the greatest DK games of all time, period, is the duo of Donkey Kong Country Returns on Wii and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze on Wii U. Sadly, Rare had actually been absorbed into Microsoft in 2002. So Retro Studios, an American company out of Texas that had made the Metroid Prime series, stepped up to the plate. And fellas, this is gaming. Absolute masterclass of game design and polish, especially in my opinion Tropical Freeze, a true 2.5D beautiful reimagining of the country formula with all the classic characters, bananas, balloons, and blistering challenge fans like me had come to expect. Now listen, I don't say this lightly, these are two of my top 15 games of all time, no doubt about it. The atmospheres, the music, the controls, the pacing, this is about as close to platforming perfection as video games get. So if you take nothing else away from this video, just go and find a way to play these games. I promise you, they're gonna make you as happy as you've ever felt in your entire life. But additionally, I think these two titles kind of highlight something else that's a little bit different about Donkey Kong as a protagonist, this famous. And it's just the kind of lack of consistency regarding his opponents in these games. Now, after Mario, it was King K. Rool, and all King K. Rool. A very badass, very unique villain that felt like an appropriate jungle-themed opponent for DK to kind of wrestle with forever. But in these more modern country titles, K. Rool is nowhere to be found, being replaced by Tiki Tong and then Lord Frederick, not exactly household names. Now, this is fine because I think it's cool that there's been some exploration and some diversity in this regard, but also, I mean, I love K. Rool. Imagine if we went that many Mario games without Bowser. And I just can't help but feel like these two games could feel a little more complete if the antagonist was our familiar, ugly, bloodshot-eyed king. Well, maybe in the next one. Who knows? Well, that sadly leads me to some bad news, which I hate to be the bearer of, and I hope you're sitting down, because it has been now 10 years. Yes, an entire whole decade since the last Donkey Kong-led video game experience, and that was Tropical Freeze on the Wii U. No, the re-releases don't count, and neither do the sports games. Don't even bring them up. I am talking about DK-centric games only. And this is just something that baffles me every single day of my life. I mean, the Donkey Kong Country games are some of Nintendo's best ever, and proven time and time again that they sell extremely well regardless of the system. But okay, you don't want to do country, that's fine. Imagine if DK got the Mario Odyssey treatment. I mean, a true 3D platform adventure game with all of those modern Nintendo bells and whistles? People, I would do unspeakable things for this to exist. Unspeakable things. Or okay, it's not going to be a big AAA thing, fine, you guys are busy over there, I get it, then just hire some smaller developers like you have in the past. Give us some of these little rhythm games or climbing things or something. Nintendo, the world is hurting, you see it? It's on fire. And this can help heal it, I promise. God, us Donkey Kong fans are down so bad I feel pathetic. But as it stands now, the Nintendo Switch, which is stupidly successful, is the only Nintendo console to not feature a brand new DK game. We should all be upset about this, people. It's tragic, it's awful, it's a crime. Okay, I'm okay. I'm okay. Because let's be honest, it could be worse. This isn't like a Waluigi situation where the character is outwardly hated and ignored by Nintendo. Donkey Kong is absolutely still around. He's in all those kind of ensemble games. He's in the Nintendo kind of marketing circle. We see him. I mean, they are building this entire new part of the Super Mario World park right now that's just called Donkey Kong Country. So, you know what? Maybe I'll look at my life and consider everything, maybe move there and just live inside of it. And then of course, I know we're all thinking about it, it's the elephant in the room, the Super Mario Bros. Movie from just last year where DK does play a pretty huge role. Now, okay, I have kind of positive but mixed feelings overall about this movie. I really meant to do a video on it when it came out, I'm sorry I didn't. Maybe one day I still will, possibly even comparing the two different Mario movies, but I just loved so much here. I think the way it looked and felt, the humor, and just the kind of video gaminess that they captured was amazing. But the bottom line is I was just not really a fan of Chris Pratt and all these other famous American people playing all the characters, aside from Jack Black. He clears easy. I just had a hard time getting used to it, even though I was having so much fun watching the movie, and the one that was the hardest for me to accept was absolutely Seth Rogen as DK. Now listen, nothing against Seth Rogen at all. I love Pineapple Express as much as the next millennial, but this is just not the character I know to be Donkey Kong. Hi, Dad! I really wanted him to sound like this. And instead, we got that stupid-ass little Seth Rogen laugh. I mean, I guess he did look pretty cool. I'll give it to him, and he did DK stuff. I just wished the characterization was more like the Rare Kong. I mean, it could have been so much worse, which is kind of sad that that's what I'm propping myself up with, but I just still can't believe that it was Seth Rogen. My God. So in the video a few years back that I did on Luigi, we talked about how his entire character was kind of pinned together with some key attributes. Things like overcoming his fears, living in Mario's shadow, and just being a generally kind of awkward but sweet guy. So if we're looking at Donkey Kong, what are those things for the ape? I mean, we mentioned already that he's always depicted as laid back, which definitely comes from the whole kind of jungle island vibe that goes along with the character, but what else is there? Well, anger is something that has certainly been on display over the years, and this is especially the case when you're looking at the original villain, as well as his depiction in the Mario vs. Donkey Kong games since. Just a sort of single-mindedness that results in DK throwing these violent tantrums when he doesn't get what he wants, even if he ultimately feels kind of guilty once things are resolved. There's this constant willingness to just get violent, throw hands, beat some ass, an aggression that is just under the surface, which I guess makes a lot of sense considering this character is a massive gorilla. And then there is the whole theme of him being, well, kind of dumb. Because remember, you can't outsmart stupid, and we have seen that time and time again with DK as well. And while this is very much linked to the original vision of the character and the name and everything, I think it has still carried over here and there with comments from other Nintendo characters about, how DK is the brawn and Diddy is the brain, things like that. But I do think there's just too much inconsistency on this front, because sometimes he seems like a very cautious, intelligent, and capable action hero, and others he's like drooling on the ground. I think developers kind of slide that intellect scale around just based on what the game is and how DK is going to be used. And then finally, the most consistent and reliable character trait here, in my opinion, is just his unwavering loyalty. His home, his bananas, his friends, his family, this is what DK lives and dies for, man. He's gonna use that anger, that stubborn nature, that physical power to do anything he can to stop whatever bad guy is kind of coming around and messing with his little setup. And this, I think, is part of what makes him so universally extremely lovable. I mean, we would all love to be this guy's buddy. A constantly smiling, chipper Chad of a hero, and that simplicity is absolutely what has made him such an icon over the decades. Talking about the legacy of a character like this, it's almost comical. Donkey Kong is easily one of the most famous fictional characters worldwide in the last 50 years, period, as well as one of the earliest major video game characters that became recognizable to people outside the dark, musty glow of arcades, a true cultural icon across all these different cultures and languages that know him. But I really think it is underappreciated just how difficult it is for any video game character to stick around longer than even like 3 or 4 years. This is an industry that turns over constantly, evolving and changing with the times and technology month to month. Every single decade, from the 1970s to right now, is riddled with once iconic faces that just couldn't make the jump to the next era, or next genre, or didn't find the right audience, or got lost in the shuffle with licensing disputes, or whatever else. But people, from 1981 to right now, Donkey Kong is one of the few that has outlasted them all. Sure, it took a helping hand here and there, and sure, he's had his dormant phases, we're kinda in one right now, but it is just incredible to me that multiple generations of humans have been able to grow up loving this character from a very early age. So why is DK my favorite? Well, there are many reasons. I think you felt my enthusiasm here today, but it really boils down to this. It has been proven to me time and time again that if this character is the star of a game, it's gonna be a little bit different. It's gonna be funky, it's gonna be experimental, it's gonna be challenging, it's gonna be polished like crazy, charming, atmospheric, it's gonna have the best jungle beats on Earth, and it is going to be right up my alley. So yes, there are many more lore-heavy, incredibly written characters out there that I also adore, but the simplicity Donkey Kong brings to the table, the charisma, the aesthetics, this is my greatest of all time, and it ain't even close. So you listening better believe if we ever sit down to play some Mario Party, some Smash, shoot some 3-on-3 hoops, I'm gonna be sticking with the one, the only, Donkey Kong. Thank you guys so much for watching and or listening to the very end. This one was a long time coming, and I certainly hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed Tropical Freeze. Heropedias are never going to perform that well in comparison to the villain stuff, but I just don't care. They're a blast to make, and I look forward to making more in the future. So, well, that's all from me today. Go play some games, be kind to one another, and I will see you guys very, very soon. Until next time, peace.